Good to be back. There's Marco D'Amico. I'm Shaun Starr. New episodes drop weekdays at 10. You can support us by supporting our sponsors at Little Bear, littlebearonline.com. Everything you need for your dog and cat and their best life. Through Chuck and his family. It's a family-owned business on St. Catherine in Montreal, across from Alexis Neon Plaza. You can find them online with specials that change all the time. And start thinking about, the fall weather. They have unbeatable prices on everything to keep your dog or cat nice and warm for that fall and winter weather at Little Bear, littlebearonline.com. Welcome to Wednesday. Welcome to day one of Montreal Canadiens rookie camp, brother. We're that much closer. You've got the Canadiens golf tournament coming up on Monday on the 15th at Laval-sur-le-Lac. And then 2 days later, the main camp finally opens up. But let's focus, Marco, our attention right here in a very narrow window. Rookies. Which ones, maybe, have a legitimate shot? Because I'll tell you, we go through the defensive pairings. We can go through 1 through 5. And to me, that's where the rubber meets the road. How big of a shot are you giving David Reinbacher to maybe throw a wrench into the spokes here? And that spoke is Xhekaj, is Jaden Struble, that Reinbacher could come in and upset the apple cart for guys that have contracts, guys that have service, games played. What do you make of that angle starting today for Habs rookie camp?
Yeah, well, first things first. David Reinbacher's knee is at 100%. That's massive. So right off the bat, that's absolutely excellent in terms of his chances of being able to crack the roster. I believe that from a tools perspective, David Reinbacher is an NHL defenseman. I believe that he has the necessary foot speed, he has the necessary gap control, he has the necessary stick positioning, and he has the necessary board success rate to be able to be an effective defensive defenseman in the NHL. Where you want him to be better or improve is probably going to be in the offensive or transitionary aspects of his skill set. And I think this is why I believe that ultimately he will wind up starting the season in Laval. But does that mean he has no chance of making this club? Absolutely not. Like you mentioned, Jaden Struble, Xhekaj have to come into this camp and play and look superior to these guys. And yes, there are contracts involved. And I think one of the things to keep into consideration is, before this trade, before the Carey Price trade, I would have been a little murky about like where they go with this. Yeah. But there is a world where the Canadiens could carry 8 defensemen now and 13 forwards and 2 goalies, right? I personally doubt it, just because I doubt that you want to like have 2 defensemen not play on a rotation to that degree, especially I believe the majority of their back-to-backs are like not in October. I think it's later. I'd have to double check that, but I just feel like, especially the fact that he hasn't played a lot, I feel like David Reinbacher would be best suited getting 25 minutes a game in all situations in Laval, and being able to, just kind of get used to the weight of a full North American season before you bring him in and basically expect him to perform on a third pair.
Let me create this hypothetical, though. Canadiens shocked the world and made the playoffs, right? I didn't think they were going to do it. I've been wrong before. I'm going to be wrong multiple times this season. Just hold on to your hat, right? At least I can admit it. But what about this hypothetical world that exists that the Canadiens did what they did? Do they feel compelled to continue with that momentum, or are they more inclined to kind of stay with their path, stay with their current vision, and not really aggressively deviate from that? And that means that if, like, I'll give you an old school example, like Guillaume Latendresse, rookie camp, starts playing big, throwing his weight around. Fans in preseason are chanting "Gee, gee, gee." I'm going to say there was a little pressure there. He makes the club, right? What if we bring that into 2025, 2026, and instead of Guillaume Latendresse, we're talking about David Reinbacher? So that's a long way of saying, are the Canadiens going to feel pressure about their success last season and maybe, air quote, rush things in order to keep this playoff-bound team on the playoff track?
The reason why the Montreal Canadiens had Guillaume Latendresse make the roster, you pointed out there was pressure, right? The other aspect was they didn't have a player like him in their lineup.
Right.
That was the biggest thing. He provided them a level of size that the lineup desperately needed as it was critiqued to be small at the time. And obviously, seeing him throw his weight around, that wasn't his style, but that's what they asked him to do in the
Exactly.
preseason. I believe, what was it, 06, 07? Was, pretty intense. So, yes, he made the club for better or for worse. And, he still had very good seasons. I think his career would have been totally fine if it wasn't for injuries. But maybe that wasn't the year. And when you look at a guy like David Reinbacher, I don't necessarily feel the same. Noah Dobson and Alex Carrier can play no problem on the penalty kill. I think it's Noah Dobson's acquisition really that provides the Canadians with a little bit more time and flexibility when it comes to David Reinbacher. Before that trade, man, was there pressure on Logan Mailloux and David Reinbacher to develop. Now, a little less, right? You could
Hmm.
afford to play a guy like Jaden Struble on his offside. It's not that big of a deal. He was excellent doing that, playing next to Lane Hudson. I don't necessarily see it. And if you look at the advanced analytics, out of the bottom pair options last year, the
Yeah.
Xhekaj Struble pairing was actually better than any other combination. So it's, to me, totally okay and respectable if those two waiver eligible players, by the way, stay and patrol the third pair. And I don't think that would necessarily inhibit the Canadians' momentum in any way. And in fact, you asked that question before. I feel like the Canadians are going to do both of those options in the sense that their main roster, they're going to expect that roster to take it up a notch. But their prospects, this is where you start getting to that 90s, 2000s Detroit model where you have a buffer where you can let your prospects simmer and not have to rush them in savior complexes because you couldn't properly build out your roster, which is what the Canadians were plagued with, you know, I'll let the fans argue this, but I'd say for at least a couple of decades. And so when it comes to the vision for David Reinbacher, the organization, from what I've been told and from the people I've spoken to, wholeheartedly view him as an NHL player.
Right.
They're just worried that he would hit a wall early because of the lack of playing over the last couple of years, and that he really just needs to get some mileage at the pro level before you pull the trigger. And that's not to say he's not going to get games. I would wager he gets games. And if there are substantial injuries, he'll get a lot of games. And
Mhm.
so to me, I think that's where the possibility with him steps. I think there's way more opportunity at forward than there is on defense.
That's Marco D'Amico with RG Media, and I'm curious, because I don't really see it another way with David Reinbacher as you outlined. I am in the camp of I agree with the line of thinking of this guy spent too much time in the AHL. I like the concept of Reinbacher getting heavy minutes, leadership role, learning how to be a top pair defenseman at the AHL. Let him get comfortable there. Let the reps get to
Yeah.
him and let him play healthy hockey. And then
Yeah.
let's see what happens because,
Hmm.
everyone has a plan until you get punched in the face. So we'll see what happens. No season is perfect, right? Which takes us into your final kind of statement there. Well, Naka, you got a stronger chin, brother. But when it comes to the forward position, right? Like, I think we can skip the goalie position. I think the goalie tandem is more or less locked in. I don't think Fowler's coming in is going to upset the apple cart and have this camp that is going to force management's decision to say, you know what, Sam Montembeault needs a better backup.
Hmm.
So let's dive into how many positions are truly, honestly open from lines 1 through 4 that a rookie can come in today and win a job.
One, with an asterisk of potentially two, depending on the Kirby Doc's health, I would
Yeah.
say. I think there is a world where the Canadians would be willing to waive Sammy Blais. Samuel, sorry, he has to be called Samuel from now on. There's a chance that they may move Samuel Blais down to Laval. He was fantastic for the Abbotsford Canucks last season in their push
Yeah.
to the Calder Cup.
Yeah.
So a really good guy to have with your young kids as well. So they're not sold necessarily on him playing in the NHL 100%. Like if someone comes in, my buddy Nicolas Cloutier at TVA Sport put out an excellent, follow through with Joshua Roy's training this summer and how he looks
Yeah.
absolutely jacked and ready to play.
Can I
So
say
if
something
they're
about that? Can I say something about, like, I read that he lost like 15 pounds and dedicated to fitness. If I could just be micro critical of that,
Where was this before?
Yeah, that's not a I
Yeah.
don't think that's a hater
So
question to
no,
ask.
no,
Like,
no,
bro,
no.
you're
You're
trying to
you're
make the
absolutely
NHL,
right.
you're trying to get paid, you're trying to establish yourself. Why
Yeah.
didn't you where was that motivation before?
I think my biggest critique for the Montreal Canadiens, and this goes back to like the Kotkaniemi era,
Go
is
ahead.
that they're not more intrinsically involved in like setting out and monitoring the physical development of their players. And I think that's always been a thing for me. Like, I know a lot of people, for example, this summer were very happy that the Canadians had a lot of their players stay in Montreal and train in
Yeah,
Montreal because then
yeah,
you get access to all the resources that you have there, right? And
yeah,
then you have like Juraj Slavkovsky training in Slovakia last year, and you had Elliot Friedman calling him a horse and he's going to come in and wreck the league and proceeds to have a very mediocre training camp and start of the season. So,
exactly.
like, what are they training on? What are they doing? How are they doing? So, the story behind Joshua Roy was that he was training on his own and he had reached a little bit of a ceiling in terms of what he can do and
Right.
wasn't necessarily receiving the guidance that he wanted. He
So he
found
plateaued
that
in
guidance
forward.
this summer. He plateaued physically. And so you
Right.
saw it in his skating, you saw it in his conditioning. And I feel like, from what I was talking about and what I've heard from, other sources on the subject, you should see a significant improvement in that matter. And I would say that a Joshua Roy with pace is an NHL player, in my opinion. And so
Yeah.
this is where I say, if the Canadians are looking to add more offense to their third line, right? Like say Kirby Dach is ready to start the season. Who's your third line center?
Yeah.
It could be Jake Evans.
Right.
It could be William. It could be Alex Newhook. It could be Joe Veleno. You name it.
Yep.
And then you're going to have to work out your wingers, right? But
Yeah.
who's to say that a third line where you have a Zachary Bolduc that has more of the physical elements to his game wouldn't work with a Joshua Roy who's more of a puck possession machine and is able to find snipers quite easily. Like that combination could work with a responsible center in the middle. I'm not saying
Sure.
it's going to happen, but I'm
Yeah.
saying that if there was a player to cause a surprise, he's one of those players on my list.
But there's
But
no
he's
room
not the last. He's not the only one.
but there's no room. Like to me, it's a gimme putt. Like to me, there's no debate. Like in the world in which, gosh, Kirby Dach doesn't start the season. Let's say in the worst
Well,
case, best case,
that's
you know,
another
wor-
scenario.
the worst case, best case is Dach doesn't start the season. Best case is he does start the season, right? But
Yeah.
in the hypothetical where he doesn't,
Well,
Alex Newhook is the 2C, Jake Evans is your 3C, and then the debate is who plays the 4C role until Kirby Dach is cleared to play again. Like Newhook has the reps, he's got air quote chemistry with some of those guys.
I
And
wouldn't
and to me,
discount Veleno
in what bumping Jake
uh,
Evans?
as a 3C. I wouldn't displace. I think
Where
the
does Evans
Canadians,
go?
and we
Four?
say,
Evans drops to
well,
four?
Evans should be at 4.
Yeah,
Like,
on a team that's a little bit more stacked than they are right now.
correct. But look
Yeah,
at the Montreal Canadiens last year in the playoffs, right? They only
yeah,
moved Evans up when they started shortening the bench, right?
right.
In the
Yeah,
last couple of games.
yeah,
But otherwise, they did not want to break up that vet line of Gallagher, Anderson, and Evans because that is, maybe their fourth line on paper, but at 5-on-5, they're used just as much as anybody else. And
agreed.
then they all have special team utilization, be it on the power play or the penalty kill. So it doesn't really matter what you're calling what. But I'm just saying that when a guy like Veleno very much could play center, be third or fourth line, doesn't really matter. And then you just put, a couple of wingers on each side. The assumption is Patrick Laine and Ivan Demidov are going to play on your second line. Then you basically would have, if Doc's not ready, Newhook on line 2, and then you bring in Veleno and or somebody else in that
Mhm,
spot.
mhm.
Now, another guy that I think could very much surprise, and if Kirby Dach is injured, is Florian Xhekaj. And I think for multiple reasons, but one of them being that he can play, like we talked about this. If you're going to make the team out of camp, you need a
Yeah,
role. This is a
correct.
guy that thrived on the penalty kill,
Yeah,
thrived in the minutes he was given at 5-on-5. Physical element, not afraid to rough him up. Like, remember we were talking about how Guillaume Latendresse had aspects of his game that the team did not have in 06, 07, and that's why he made the roster? The
sure.
same could apply right now to a guy like Florian Xhekaj. The difference is Florian Xhekaj is a little bit more mature in terms of prospect. Even though he started later in his career, he's a more mature, more polished at this time of his career than Latendresse was. And when Kirby Dach comes back, he can always be sent back down. So, like, you have that ability. Latendresse had to make that team or was back to, I believe, Drummondville.
Correct.
So
Correct.
it's a different dynamic. And so I like.
Go ahead. Sorry.
I just like the, he's good on the draws as well. He's a left shot. All these elements that the Canadiens would like to add, right? I just feel like it's an opportunity in front of him if, of course, Dach is unable to play. Now, we keep talking about the scenario of where Dach is unhealthy. There is another guy, if Dach is healthy, that I'd like to get into, but I want to hear your point.
Yeah, just to finish on Guillaume Latendresse, I remember at the time, Guy Boucher, who used to coach the Drummondville Voltigeurs, when I covered the Montreal Juniors, who was coached by Pascal Vincent, coming from the Cape Breton Screaming Eagles program that he helped turn around, I remember Guy Boucher, because we interviewed him, he talked about how, and we mentioned this in an earlier episode this week, that the Canadiens organization had this vision for Guillaume, and I think to me, it always reaffirms, it always reaffirms that, as much as Juraj Slafkovsky says he wants to be Brady Tkachuk, I think you got to be born Brady Tkachuk. I don't think that's a skill you can learn. And they tried to teach that to Guillaume when he wasn't hardwired to be that bleep hole physical power forward, but he tried, right? He tried to do that. And so to finish my thought, Florian Xhekaj, to me, was born to be that guy on the ice who's comfortable mixing it up. It's not an unfamiliar place on the ice for him. He may look at the season he had. He thrived in that role under Pascal Vincent. So to me, he has a much better chance to be that guy for the Canadiens based on how they lost to Washington, based on Jeff Gorton's postseason wrap-up. They want that dog. They want that tough guy out there. They're going to give him a lot of room to force their hand into a decision here. I love that possibility for this club.
There was one quote, and then I'll get into the other guys that I want to talk about, because we're talking about guys cracking the roster, but there are rookies attending this camp, some for the first time, that I think are going to impress during the showcase. The quote, Pascal Vincent once told me, "We still don't know what Florian Xhekaj's ceiling is, because every time we think he has one, he breaks through it." And I think that is, it takes me back to when Kent Hughes said we want to have players that continuously improve. Yeah, that's the mindset. Because again, when Florian was drafted, people saw it as a nepo pick because the team already had Arbor. But the idea was that the tools were there. He just didn't have the runway to prove what he was. And to, again, be drafted as an overager, like he was drafted in 19, had a good season in the OHL. And then just the performance that he had for the Laval Rocket last season, I just feel like, that the progression curve keeps going up. And the Canadiens are intrigued at where it can go. Now, this is another, when we were talking about players that could relatively surprise, we keep talking about, well, maybe could they? I have an eye for Owen Beck. I seriously have an eye for Owen Beck. Owen Beck's name was brought up in trade discussions this summer with the New York Islanders. He was one of the prospects that the Islanders liked. That ultimately they went with Emil Heineman. They wanted someone that was a little bit more physical, someone that could be part of that new age identity line that they used to have back in the day. But Owen Beck, to me, is a man on a mission, in the sense that, we just finished talking about Florian for all of his qualities, but Owen Beck was drafted 33rd overall to be that future top end third line center. And for him to really reach that goal, he's got to get reps in. And I feel like last year was a little too early. Obviously there were some good looks and I really appreciated his play, but you saw that he maybe wasn't there yet from a skating or physicality perspective. But looking at his versatility for the Laval Rocket in the playoffs, seeing how angry he was on the ice, you saw an element of his game that impressed the Canadiens management team. And it's not like they want to throw, like when you talk about prospects in a deal for a guy like Noah Dobson, it's not because you necessarily see that player just being a guy that you don't need. It's just when you have a Jake Evans, when you have a Florian Xhekaj, when you have a Tyler Thorpe, when you have a Hayden Papanikis, well, maybe you could sacrifice one of these guys. And so that's why Owen Beck's name was kind of brought up. But they're thankful to have him around. And this is a guy that has legit NHL experience now, right?
Yes, he
So
does.
he knows what it takes, and he spent all summer getting ready for this opportunity. And I have a funny feeling that the fact that he can play center, any wing,
Mhm.
take draws on left and right side, makes him a very unique asset for the Montreal Canadiens on a bottom six. And so, if, for example, Florian's offense doesn't translate, and it's you mostly just see the physicality in preseason, then that Owen Beck is a guy that could potentially come in and surprise to me because he has other aspects. His shot, in my opinion, is better. Although he didn't score as many goals, I think he has better shooting mechanics. He's definitely got stronger vision, in my opinion, and better skating. But he is the kind of player that I believe if you play with, I don't know, Zachary Budzik, for example, could be lightning in a bottle because he has played with similar kind of players in the past, be it for Team Canada or in the OHL. And I feel like this is an individual that, again, can fill multiple roles, especially with the Canadians' penalty kill that is now without Christian Dvorak and Joel
Joel Armia.
Armia. So
Yeah.
to me, it's very important in that sense that you bring in a guy that could be used in those situations that could bring value beyond simply just being a guy you plug in at 5-on-5.
Welcome to the start of Habs rookie camp, man. I mean, it feels like, waiting for names like Owen Beck and others. David Reinbacher certainly at the top of the list for me anyway, and Florian Xhekaj rounding out that podium. It's another year, and it's another opportunity to
Yeah.
take the next step, right? That's what this is about. Can you evolve? Can you develop and keep ahead of the expectations that maybe your coaching staff or your management staff have for you? It's now time to show up. It's the next year.
And I would even say it's also a time to leave your calling card, right? We're
Absolutely.
talking about the guys that could
Correct.
potentially make the roster. What about the
Correct.
guys that are trying to assess and assert themselves within the organizational depth chart of the Montreal Canadiens? I talk about guys like Tyler Thorpe, who
Yep.
was very noticeable in last year's development or rookie camp. I look forward to seeing what he does this time around. Again, another big body that plays on the wing that has a nose for the net. And then one of the guys that I actually spoke to that we'll have an article on at RG Media this week is Hayden Papanikis,
Yep.
who a lot of people I've spoken to out of the CHL are like, this guy should have been a second round pick all day, every day. Like that kind of center is so invaluable. And again, 6'5". He tells me he's closer to 205 pounds now at 18.
Got some big boys
Really
now.
worked on his skating.
Mhm.
Josh Georges said to me that he's the kind of center that, if he develops properly, helps you win cups. And I am very intrigued because he took his summer training very seriously. I'm very intrigued to see how he improves on, because I thought he was one of the better players to watch at
Mhm.
Canadiens development camp. Very interested to see how a big, lanky center like that plays for the Montreal Canadiens at rookie camp.
I love rookie camp. I'm all about, really. I love watching players that have chosen to be pros, and like you said, they want to leave a calling card. They want to stand out and force the coaches, force the managers to say, "Oh man, look at this guy. Look at this guy." To
Yeah.
me, that's one of the most appealing storylines to follow. And you'll follow it along with Marco D'Amico and yours truly. Don't forget, new episodes drop at 10 a.m. Set that notification bell. That way you don't miss anything. And of course, the audio version of what you just watched is always available on all your favorite audio podcast platforms. There's Marco D'Amico with RG Media. I'm Shaun Starr. Don't forget, we're back at 10 a.m. tomorrow as we get set. The Montreal Canadiens having a little cap space here. What does that mean as it relates to the trade market? Marco D'Amico has the latest tomorrow at 10 a.m.